Figure it out.
All right, so I know Lindsay likes calling me Dr. Liz Scott.
Yeah.
I do hold a doctorate in physical therapy. I am a board certified specialist in neurologic rehabilitation. And so that was my practice for 10 plus years. About 2 years ago, though, I sustained a surgery that physically rendered me unable to treat patients in the clinic anymore. From there, ooh, I can Yay! Okay. So she made me co-host. So now I can share my screen with you too. So I was no longer able to treat patients, and because of that, life just changed a lot. Okay, now of course, hold on. We're gonna do it this way because anytime I do it in present mode, I can't figure like it changes my screens and does all these weird things. So we're gonna take that away. No, normal. I just want to make it big enough that you guys can see it. Okay. Can you guys see that? Is that big enough? Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes,
So
it's great.
awesome. So one of the reasons is because I think pictures tell a lot about a person other than just me telling you guys who I am, right? So I stopped treating because I couldn't any longer. I was dealing with severe nerve pain in my arm, on top of some chronic illnesses I had, but it was truly divine intervention, in my opinion, in that it stopped me on the path I was going, which was trying to be this pushing towards executive and doing all these things in my life from a business standpoint, and I was serving others, right? Like I was doing good things, but I also had these three amazing children at home and I was trying to be the best of both. And I know being at home isn't necessarily it's not for everyone, right? Like I totally get that, but it was what I needed. It was what I was supposed to be doing. And so, in March, oh my gosh, it was March 31st of last year. So just over a year ago, last year, we moved to Central Illinois, and I've been homeschooling my three children for the last 2 years. We are building a 3-acre homestead. We had only 8 chickens, and we now have 28 chicks and 7 hens. So we're up to 35 chickens. There's a thing called chicken math. Look it up. You start with 2, you build to 30. It's a thing. But my passion has always been in serving others and in health and in nutrition. And in the last probably year and a half, 2 years, I have really taken a totally different look at what I can be doing for my health, because I had gotten to a point where anyone I met with told me they couldn't do anything more for me. And I knew that my answers didn't stop there. I knew there was more for me. I knew there was more I could be doing. And I've been led down this holistic path that has been just the most amazing realm to dive into. And I have seen some of the most amazing benefits from it. And so grounding is just going to be one part of that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And it's something that it's newer to me, but inherently we've been doing it since we moved out here. And it's really cool to see what it's been doing for my kids and then also for myself as well. So I'm going to get started on that. And then at the end, if there's any questions, I'll go ahead and dive into any questions that you guys bring up. So grounding, what is it and how does it help? So the definition of grounding is that it's a technique that involves doing activities to ground or electrically reconnect you to the earth. And the reason that there's both definitions is that they've actually created grounding systems using electrical currents. It's sometimes copper, it's mostly copper in what I was able to find, but somehow those electrical, like they can lay them under, you can like lay them under your mattress, or you can put them under your feet. Like there's mats that you can like put under your feet if you're stuck in an office all day. And it's somehow connected to the electrical current of the outside. And that's what's then bringing grounding into those that can't necessarily get out in nature. But it all started with just being connected to the earth through your skin. So it does need to, the idea began with skin to earth contact, right? So there was a 2015 study in the Journal of Inflammation. Now, being this healthcare science background I'm big into research. And so what amazes me is so much of the holistic health that doesn't ever necessarily get to mainstream media does have a lot of research to back it up. And we just don't hear about it as often. And so that's what I love to bring to other people's attention. So this study used medical infrared imaging to monitor the changes that were going on inside the people's bodies using like heat maps, basically, to show where the inflammation was or wasn't and what was going on electrically within the body as well. What they found in this study was that grounding in itself improved sleep, normalized our cortisol rhythm. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, reduced pain and stress, shifted our autonomic nervous system, which are our parasympathetic system, away from fight or flight, which is a high stress response, to more of a calm response. It increased the speed of wound healing. And I spared everyone pictures just because I didn't know how everyone would feel about that. But what they showed was actually a woman who had had a diabetic foot ulcer that hadn't been healing. And they showed the effects of grounding on her ulcer and how it got better over time to completely heal when she had been struggling with it and it hadn't been healing for a while. And then it also improved blood flow. So all of this sounds really good, right? It's like, oh, wow, that would be amazing. But I always am that person, why? What is it that's making all of this happen? And that's really what got me going into the holistic world at all is what's the root cause? And that's what is so important. We tend to treat the external symptoms, the crazy that's going on, the what we can see, but we forget about all the inside and what's going on from internally. So why does it work? Grounding from a sleep perspective has an effect on our cortisol secretion. So cortisol is actually the hormone that's released when we are in high stress. Over time, when cortisol stays within your body, it actually causes systemic inflammation. And if you are constantly feeling like you are in a fight or flight situation, like that's your baseline, your body is constantly secreting cortisol. When you are participating in grounding, the cortisol is actually reduced. The brain doesn't need to emit it as much, and you get back into a normal rhythm of that hormone being within your body. So not only did it improve sleep because of the reduction in the cortisol, it also helped with relief from asthmatic and respiratory conditions because of reducing that inflammation, rheumatoid arthritis, PMS symptoms, sleep apnea, and hypertension. So many of these being chronic diseases are due to chronic inflammation. So anything we can do to reduce inflammation in the body is going to have really, truly systemic effects as well. As far as pain and inflammation, they actually looked at a group of men and women and asked them to do weighted exercises focused on the calf muscles. And what they then did was they did a control group that didn't get any grounding. And with these, they were using the grounding systems. And then they did a group that was participating using the grounding system. And they found a reduction in the delayed onset muscle soreness that we all know so well. If we've ever tried to work out and haven't worked out in a while and we pushed too hard, you felt that soreness like 3 days later and you're still not able to walk up the stairs. So what they found is that those that use the grounding, not only did they not have the DOMS, they also were able to measure using blood tests that the white blood cells did not increase as much in the experimental group versus the controls, which are a form of inflammatory markers. And then what their theory on why this is happening is that when we are connected to the ground is giving off electricity, and it can give our bodies these free electrons. Free electrons is exactly the function of what any product that you take that is marketed as an antioxidant, that's what it's doing. It's donating electrons to unstable oxygen molecules within our body that tend to damage good tissue around an area that's fighting something off. So what this is doing is it's a free form of antioxidant coming from the earth because of the electromagnetic field that we are connecting with when we are in these grounded states. Being that it does that, it's going to protect our healthy tissue from damage as well. So this is an example. So you see Mr. Shoes is ungrounded because he's wearing shoes, and I'm going to touch on shoes in just a little bit. The ground substance is already depleted of those electrons. Neutrophils are a type of white blood cell, and they're attracted to an injury site or a site that you've just worked from exercise. And you're going to deliver a burst of free radicals because there's damage in that area, and then it's going to cause inflammation. When you have the grounded effect, the neutrophils are attracted because of the injury, but you don't have that free radical burst because of the electrons in the area stabilizing all those molecules, which then reduces any sort of additional damage to healthy tissue around the area. Okay, so the study showed that when the body is grounded, its electrical potential equalizes with the earth. And you've seen this in other other studies with physics of things equalizing, like a volume container or a pressure container. We equalize in order to reduce strain. So this was actually confirmed in a study by Nobel Prize winner Richard Feynman. So he took electrical potential equal. When electrical potential is equal, the body becomes an extension of the Earth's gigantic electrical system. And so I thought it was really interesting that there's Nobel Prize winning research on this, and still it's not something that we hear very much about. So I thought that was really interesting for me. Another study also looked at the effect on blood. And so one night of sleeping grounded actually led to changes in concentrations of minerals and electrolytes in the blood serum, which electrolytes and minerals in the body are what help to improve the efficiency of all the enzymatic activities that are going on inside our body. We have more than 1,000 enzymatic processes happening every minute inside our body. And without the proper balance of minerals and electrolytes, those can't work as efficiently. Blood samples after a single night had also showed an impact on thyroid blood measurements, indicating an influence on both the liver, the brain, and within the brain, it was in the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which all have relationships with thyroid function. It's an area of additional research. They don't have enough to claim that this will have if you're hypo, it's going to improve, or if you're hyper, it's going to reduce. But they do know that they are seeing the changes in the blood, and it's giving them a reason to research it further. And then changes in the electrical environment, just in general, if you're thinking about, well, how does this work? If you change the electrical environment, it alters the pH of the environment. So if I'm changing the internal electrical environment of my body, I'm going to change the pH levels of my body. As we change the pH, that also influences enzymatic function, which is why we talk about wanting a more neutral gut. You don't want it to be too acidic. You don't want it to be too basic, because all of that impacts how the enzymes work in your body, same as in your mouth. So if indeed, when we are grounding, we are improving the electrical function of our body, we are also going to optimize that enzymatic function as well. Okay, so in a summary of the research, I looked mainly at review articles because I wanted to make sure that if I was going to be looking at this, I'm looking at articles that have already reviewed multiple articles of one time. That's my favorite to get to. Oops, there we go. Okay, so what they found is that there are anti-aging effects, because aging is determined by the cumulative effect caused by oxidative stress. So if we're reducing the oxidative stress in our body by balancing these rogue oxygen molecules that are causing damage elsewhere, we're going to age more gracefully. It also has anti-inflammatory. For the same reasons, the inflammatory response is going to be localized and not extend to the undamaged tissue surrounding it because of the neutralizing effect on those free radical molecules. The most common cause of death and disability in the US is also chronic disease. And like I said before, chronic inflammation may lead to most chronic diseases. There's still a lot of research out there, but that's the common thread that we're starting to see with the research. So an inflammatory response may actually be due to an electron deficiency. And by grounding, you're balancing out the electrons within the body. A little bit of history on all of this as well. An earth connection, if we think back to our ancestors, was an everyday reality, whether they were walking in the skins of animals, sleeping in tents made from the skins of animals, or just being outside on the ground, right? Like that was their reality. It wasn't actually until the 1950s that any of our footwear had insulated soles. An insulated sole protects you from the magnetic connection, the electromagnetic connection of what you would get from the ground. It was designed also to protect from, viruses and all the things that creep and crawl and grow and all the, walking into a bathroom. No thanks. I'm not doing that in my bare feet. But the idea of being in socks and shoes all the time may actually be detrimental to our health. And it's just a really interesting concept to think about is how often do you just walk outside? How often are you barefoot in the grass? How often do I look at my kids' feet now that we're out on a homestead and be like, there's dirt everywhere. But the more I research and the more I know about it, the dirt that they're bringing in is actually less detrimental to their health and probably more beneficial. It's not like I'm letting them walk around in a public restroom with their socks off, right? Like the dirt and everything around where we live can actually be beneficial to their health and our health in many more ways than I would have thought. I would have thought dirt's good for your microbiome. We'll go with that. But now as I learn all about this with grounding, I'm learning that there's even more of a benefit.
And then in the I was gonna interject real fast.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that with shoes is, in our house, we're like, okay, no shoes on in our house because we have babies that are crawling around and doing all sorts of stuff. But what's interesting about that to me is also think about where your shoes go all day long. I mean, you're like at the gas station or you're like at a school. I mean, schools are pretty clean, but you get my drift. You know what I mean? Like, or you're at the airport and then you walk your shoes into someone's home. And I have like a slide somewhere or a picture that says exactly what's on the bottom of your shoe that now you're tracking into your house. So the fact that they're bringing dirt from your homestead, which, you're probably growing your food in and whatnot, seems so much more harmless than your everyday activity, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that's what, like that concept to me was, it was a light bulb, right? It was like, oh yeah, for sure. So in the 1920s, a medical doctor by the last name of Dr. White investigated the practice of sleeping grounded after being informed that he had patients that couldn't sleep unless they were on the ground, which I thought was interesting because I don't like sleeping on the ground. And this is where they started getting the systems using the copper wires. But what he found is that improving sleep using these techniques, it just never caught on. Like he found that when these patients slept grounded and he tested it, they truly did have improved sleep. And there's research to back it up, but it just never really caught on in mainstream society. So these are a couple of the references. I have the articles as well if you guys would like to look at them. Both of them were like kind of a review of multiple things. But I told Lindsay I could keep going on that. I could have gotten into like herbs and plants and superfoods and how that can help you. But I really just wanted to bring it. And Lindsay had, kind of reached out to me being like, I'd love to just keep it focused on Earth and Mother Earth and something very applicable to that. And so I'd love to open it up at this point to any questions you might have.
And I think we're going to stop the recording for now, but we'll definitely carry on with questions if you guys have them. So thank you guys so much for those who are here. And we're just going to stop the recording.